Audio on demand from Vision Christian Media.
You're listening to Momentum, a show that helps men succeed in life. And as we delve into this week's topic, a reminder that some of the content may be of a sensitive nature. Now, here's your host, Des Kennedy.
Well, welcome to this week's Momentum. It is Tim and Des with you once again all around Australia. We are so appreciative of you tuning in and hope you're going well. Hope you're doing well. You know, we are all going through stuff in life, and hopefully at the Momentum website you can find some stuff to help you on your journey. That is momentumaustralia.org. And of course we have a care line, but I'll let my good friend, co-host and Irish legend, Des Kennedy, introduce that in just a tick.
Are legends not people who are already dead?
No. You've already reached that status, my friend.
I know I'm a own man, but I mean, that's a bit rough. But our Momentum Care Line, please, guys, just remember the number. It's an easy number to remember. It's 1-800-000-MEN. And it is provided by our friends at Careline Connections. And it is all about giving you a number that you can call whenever you're struggling, when you're on your own, when you need to reach out to somebody and you don't have anybody close around you. And you can reach out 7 days a week between 9 a.m. and 11 p.m., 1-800-000-MEN. Now, just before we continue, I just want to say, as we always say, that is, find somebody that you can get close to, who can hold us all accountable, who you can be open and honest with, because that is the greatest benefit to you as a man. And so, But if you haven't got that, 1-800-000-MEN.
Yeah, good stuff, Des. Yeah, we do absolutely endorse here at Momentum men not doing life on their own. And so we encourage that for sure. And, you know, there's certain times of year that can certainly bring those feelings of isolation and loneliness. And one of them, of course, is Father's Day. And we want to acknowledge not only Father's Day, but acknowledge and celebrate all dads making a positive difference in their kids' lives and or those making a difference in the lives of kids in communities all around Australia. And
as you know, Tim, fatherlessness is a growing problem, and it is having a huge impact on not only Australian children, but in families, but also right across communities and societies.
And one organisation which has been around for several years now, it's helping men all around Australia be better dads, is the Fathering Project. Now, the project was founded back in 2013 by Dr. Bruce Robinson. Since then, Bruce has become somewhat of a leader in the promotion of good fathering.
And he's written 3 best-selling books on fathering. I don't know how you get 3 books, but that's amazing. You're able to write 3 books and giving fathering seminars all around the world. And it's a great privilege and pleasure to have Bruce with us on this week's Momentum. Welcome, Bruce.
Thanks, guys. Nice talking to you.
Bruce, for those who perhaps haven't heard of you, they may have heard of the Fathering Project, not sure where it's come from. I mean, you're the man that instigated all of this. Let's find out a bit about you before we launch into the Fathering Project. Born in Freo here in Western Australia in 1950, you grew up in Bassendean, which is just on the outskirts of the city. And you once said that growing up in a stable and loving home is something people typically come to appreciate later in life. So without further ado, tell us a bit about your childhood. What was that like for you?
Yes, very much a working class childhood. Bassendean was a factory suburb. Dad worked in a factory. Mum was a typical housewife. And we didn't have much money, but, you know, we just had a pretty nice family. Not a perfect family, but I still keep up with some of my school friends from Bassendean. We all played footy together and we still catch up. And we had a discussion a few weeks ago. What did we appreciate about growing up in such a working class environment on the river? Everybody said the same thing, a Tom Sawyer childhood. Riding your bike, swimming, you know, just basically disappearing from home. Freedom. But then when you got home, meal on the table and a lot of love. And again, I don't want to pretend it was a perfect family, but certainly felt loved.
I mean, that's a great basis for a family anyway, isn't it? Just having, you know, looking back and saying, you know, I was loved. I mean, there's so many men that come, you know, listen to Momentum who wouldn't have had that experience of, you know, feeling loved and so forth. They, you know, would maybe the other end of the spectrum. You know, there's lots of them have all the things that they want, but don't feel the love. And that's really sad.
I think that is a challenge, you know, and I know, having talked to so many thousands of dads, that the process of communicating love to children, I mean, you can easily say it, hey, I love you. Although a lot of dads struggle to do that. But even then, kids are too smart to be hoodwinked by a phrase, oh, I love you so much. Actually showing love is a challenge for dads. Probably harder now than when I was a kid.
So why do you think that is?
Well, I think there's a couple of problems that we're confronted with, and one of them is, my dad used to get home every night at 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
But dads nowadays, they get home a lot later, and they're often on their phones and, a bit, distracted by, just still having to work at home, or maybe just not having to, but working at home. Hard for the kids to get their dad's attention. But there is another major problem, which is that the kids of today face a lot more challenges than when I was a kid.
Mm.
One of the obvious ones is drugs. Methamphetamine is a party drug.
Yeah.
Binge drinking, 17-year-olds, 32% of 17-year-olds binge drink at least once a month. Major risks. Social media, and when I talk about social media, it's not an evil per se, but you think of a couple of things. The first is cyberbullying. When I was a kid at school, some kid could get whacked and, everyone would gather around, but it was all over in 5 minutes. Now it's 24 hours a day. It's, lots of people can see it. It's anonymous, so anyone can do it. It's very hurtful to kids. It's very hard for them to feel love. And the other one is actually pornography. And I'm talking now about preteens who have a distorted view, for example, of being able to love someone. This is not a moralistic question. This is actually a fundamental question about being able to engage with another human being in an intimate way based on love. This is what all the sociologists say.
Bruce, can I ask then, as a father, when we're parenting boys and girls, obviously the love thing would kind of span over both, but each needs to be spoken to slightly differently to draw out that individualness in who they are, right? So can you give us some bullet points for parents of or dads of boys, and then what we're speaking into boys' lives particularly, and likewise for girls?
Well, let me start with girls. Pretty easy, because I wrote a book about daughters and their dads, and that was because of the clamoring of mothers to say, please write a book about daughters and their dads. Dads have got no idea. This is what they had told me too. But in answer to your question, there are three things a daughter needs from her dad, as distinct from a son. One is she has to be told she's beautiful inside and out. Secondly, she has to be given confidence. Not say, oh, that's a stupid thing, but ask her opinion and say she feels confident, because the imposter syndrome is very common in girls when they grow up.
Yeah.
And thirdly, a daughter learns from her dad how to expect to be treated by a man.
That's absolutely right.
And, I was told by James Dobson, actually, when I spoke to him in America, that the commonest reason for success or failure in a marriage with a woman, is the relationship she had with her dad.
Wow.
And that's really scary if you've got a daughter, as I have. I think, wow, I've really got to get into the game here. So how I treat her, let me just give you one example. If I treat my daughter with respect, if I set that bar of respect really high, she won't put up with crap from blokes. But if I drop that bar down and don't respect her, she says I'm not worthy of respect, and all sorts of things can happen. So they're the three things a daughter needs. And just to finish, a son, well, let's face it, boys have always learnt as apprentices to their dad. They were with them hunting. They were with them on the farm, shoulder to shoulder, pushing the plough, etc. And now they go to primary school and kindy, and they're taught by women, mostly, almost exclusively. No matter how hard we try, we can't get blokes into the primary school, much better in secondary school, where my son is. So you have to accept the fact that you have to spend time with your boys shoulder to shoulder. They are your apprentices in life. Just wagging your finger at them doesn't work. You have got to be there with them. Not all the time, of course. You've got to work and they've got to go to school, etc. But you've got to spend a lot of time shoulder to shoulder. And we talk in the Fathering Project about things like dad dates. You go out with your kids, one-on-one. No other, not you and three kids, you and one kid. If you got three sons, you have three different dad dates. You talk to them as mates. You talk and you listen. You listen. The second great trip, this is a winner, is a dad trip with your kids. Again, dad and the son, well, and daughters as well, but shoulder to shoulder, take them on a trip, footy trip to Melbourne, conference trip, a work trip. we actually gave this tip to the West Coast Eagles, one of the footy teams over here. Not doing too well at the moment. But anyway, their coaches, we do a program with them, and their coaches started to take their kids one at a time to the away games. I mean, it's a beautiful thing to see.
Yes.
That's the sort of shoulder to shoulder that a boy in particular needs.
Yes. I mean, it's funny you say that. One of the things that Tim and I talked about when I was talking about my father, he was a loving, caring, godly man. But, and there's a huge but, he didn't spend time. You know, he was busy reading his Bible, or he's busy working, and, you know, that was just his world. And so, you know, he'd come home on a Saturday night, he had shoe shops, and he'd come home on a Saturday night and he'd sort of pull into the garage, and I'd be excited. I'd be out in the back garden playing, and I'd say, Dad, come and kick a ball with me. And never once in my entire life did he do it. And so I know exactly what you're talking about.
You know, I'm actually fascinated by people who are like that, and not to criticize anyone who goes to church and sort of overdoes it, but if you think of one of the most famous stories in the Bible, it's the story of the prodigal son. You know, he goes off, wine, women, and so on, comes back to his dad and volunteers to work as a, labourer.
Yeah.
Farm. And his dad runs out and gives him a hug, and then he won't listen to his speech. He says, I love you anyway, mate. I mean, I don't care what you've done. I love you anyway, right? So,
yeah. And
there's a couple of things about that. One is being there for your kids.
Yeah.
I mean, he could have been out there fixing his tractor or something and just said, I'll get round to seeing you. But he ran down the street. I mean, to be there for your kids, if they know you're there for them, it's such a powerful thing.
Yeah.
And secondly, to love them without condition. You've run down the street, and I've told this story actually on radio. I made them cry when I told it, but I told them the story of Janis Joplin, the rock and roll singer who went off and went back home for a school reunion and sort of flounced around. She was a drug addict and alcoholic, various things. Flounced around the streets of the town with her entourage, and instead of her dad running down the street, because it was conservative Texas, throwing his arms around her, he left town for the day.
Oh, wow.
He should have run down the street and thrown his arms around her and said, I don't care what people say or how many cameras are here. I love you, and, I've got a party organised for you. A month later, she died of an overdose.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
How can we get this so wrong?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. It's profound.
Do you think there's an element in, before we go to a break, where, I mean, the lack of education of dads. So, they didn't have a father figure, and so they didn't have the right instruction, or maybe any instruction in terms of being a dad.
Absolutely. The reason we started the Fathering Project, it was only two reasons. One is dads didn't realise, and still don't, how important they are.
Yeah.
They sort of think that they're a bit optional. Muck around with the kids, have an ice cream. Mum will do the parenting. They don't realise that dads are absolutely crucial for all of those key things and reducing all of those risks that we worry about in kids, drugs and depression and all that stuff. Secondly, once they realise they're important, they don't know what to do because their dad wasn't much good.
Yeah.
Or it's a different generation. How do I deal with cyberbullying, etc.? So Fathering Project started to make them realise those two things. You are important, and hey, we've got a treasure chest of tips for you that you can use that actually work.
Yeah. Amazing.
Well, we are going to go to a short break, but in the meantime, we will point you to the website, and that is thefatheringproject.org, thefatheringproject.org. Love you to have a quick squiz around that as we take a short break here at Momentum and come back and talk to Dr. Bruce Robinson. He is the head of the Fathering Project. Again, thefatheringproject.org, and of course our website, momentumaustralia.org. We'll be back with the second part of Momentum real soon. Stay tuned.
You're listening to Momentum, a show that helps men succeed in life. Find out more at momentumaustralia.org.
If this program has highlighted something you'd like prayer for, we'd love to pray for you. Call 1-800-PRAY-FOR-ME. That's 1-800-772-936. It's a free call. Or text 0401 132 888.
You're listening to Momentum, a show that helps men succeed in life. Find out more at momentumaustralia.org.
All right, well, welcome back to the second part of this week's Momentum. Once again, Tim is with you, and we are joined by our special guest, Dr. Bruce Robinson from the Fathering Project. Thefatheringproject.org is the website. Encourage you to check it out. There is a bunch of resources on that website, thefatheringproject.org. And actually, judging from the way that the first part of the show, Des now just saying, it felt like about 5 minutes. So there's a lot of information that's probably going to come at you in the next 10 to 15 minutes. So maybe grab a notepad as well as you're listening. But Dr. Bruce Robinson is our special guest. And Bruce, just before we launch into the Fathering Project and a bit more about that, I did want to ask you, because you said, when you were young, your dad came home at 5 o'clock every night. And I'm curious to know what the relationship was between you and your dad. I suppose the overriding theme in the first part of the show was spending time, just time with our kids is really important. So what did that look like for you and Dad when he got in at 5 o'clock every night? What was the relationship between you guys?
Good question. He didn't do a lot at 5 o'clock. I mean, there was a lot of wood chopping and, we had to chop wood for the fires and mowing of lawns. And I don't, on the plus side, Dad in the summer would take us, me and my brother and sister, early morning swimming down the river. And would take us out camping. And Dad's idea of camping was just to get into the car and get a sleeping bag and sleep under the stars and get some wood and catch some fish to. My mother, I think, wasn't sure whether all the kids would come home, but it was a fantastic experience. But I've got to be honest and say he did have a drinking problem as well. He learnt to drink during the war and heavy smoker, and that caused him problems at various times. And that actually affected, to be honest, my brother quite a bit. He was younger than me, and Dad had his worst times of depression and drinking when my brother was, sort of needed him. So, but yeah, there was time. I just quickly say two things. Well, one thing about my dad. Two things. One is my dad taught me to take responsibility for my own life. He didn't say, if you get into trouble and come home and the police and, I'll thrash you within an inch of your life. He said, it's your responsibility, mate. I'll be disappointed, but you'll face the consequences. You make your own decisions in life. You think about it and make your own decisions. Secondly, he was a good role model for making a difference. He was president of the RSL, looked after all the old veterans, him and his mates, and he basically measured the success of life by whether you made a difference. And that impacted on me quite a bit and how I live my life in medicine and in life.
Two good things to say about your dad. That's really cool.
Yeah. Let's launch into Fathering Project. Again, thefatheringproject.org. You founded it back in 2013, and the aim is supporting father figures to be the best parent they can be so their children can thrive. I suppose lead us back into 2013, 2012, whatever has led you to that point to go, I need to do something about this, and I'm going to be the guy that's going to step up and do something.
Yeah, it wasn't quite as, like a lot of things, sort of an accident, but a couple of seminal moments. The first is sitting in so I'm a lung specialist in medicine.
Right.
And that's the commonest lethal cancer. So I have to tell people, mostly men, not always, that they're going to die. To be honest, about 3 hours ago, I told a man in his 50s he had cancer. This is how often I do it.
Wow.
And but I also do the journey with them. That's, showing compassion to my patients. I don't just sort of handball them on to oncology, etc. So we get talking, and the men, they always, when they talked about regrets, they said, I wish I'd spent more time with my kids. But the thing that got to my heart, honestly, when they said, you can't get the time back again.
Yes.
I wish someone had told me when I was young.
Yes.
Wow.
How to be a good dad. I can't get the time back again. But the other seminal moment actually was when we started to look at the statistics. And it turns out being a good dad isn't just good for dads. Hey, feel good about it and go to sleep at night feeling happy and having good times. It's that it has a spectacular effect on the well-being of children. In other words, if you don't have a good dad, your risks of things like being a drug addict or getting depressed or losing your values, maybe end up in jail, or bad attitude, bullying at school, they're all profoundly reduced if you've got a good dad. So we realized this wasn't just good for dads, this is good for kids. I mean, we owe this to our kids to really get dads engaged and learning what a good dad is.
Mm.
That's how it started. And then I started giving talks at schools and what have you, and basically a board formed, and now it's all over the country.
It's amazing.
He says, just so matter of fact.
Yes.
But
yes,
I mean,
that's right.
look, when I knew about you guys here in Western Australia, we've heard about the Fathering Project a fair bit, particularly because obviously it was founded here. But it wasn't until I was doing the research for this interview that I didn't understand just how much you have on offer for guys at the website. And I can't stress that enough, thefatheringproject.org. A couple of key things I want to unpack with you. You've got one of the things on there, the Fathering Channel, which I thought was really cool because there's just simple stuff on there. There's deeper stuff on there. There's like tips for cooking. There's tips for how to have certain conversations at certain ages with your kids, that sort of thing. I mean, just really practical stuff for dads. I just thought that was so brilliant. And again, easy stuff that dads can access and take on board.
So why would you put on there tips for cooking?
Well, every dad's different, and every kid's different, and every circumstance is different. So
Sure.
well, that was what they wanted. So, I mean, I'm not a cook. Honestly, Des, I'm utterly useless. A very bad role model for that. Although, fortunately, my son's cook. No, the Fathering Channel started during COVID, actually, when all the dads were kids. So we had to do stuff. And, we had things like camping out in the backyard and instructions for that and, ideas and tips for. And, of course, we have ideas and tips for how dad's groups at schools can have a camp out in the school playground. How do you make that work? And in fact, I encourage any dad who's listening to, to go to their school principal or their P&C and say, we want a dad's group in our school. We're going to start it.
Well, let's talk about dad's groups, right? Because this is, again, Des and I, our key messaging around Momentum is dads to not do life in isolation, get connected.
Yeah.
Start having conversations that, about stuff that's happening in your life. Let's just not talk about the footy, and particularly if the West Coast Eagles are involved at the moment, let's definitely not talk about the footy, but that's a different story.
I don't know anything about the West Coast Eagles.
Well, you're not missing much in that instance. But look, let's talk about the dads groups in particular, because, I mean, when I look at some of the stats, right, Bruce, 98% of dads reported feeling more connected to other dads. 82% of dads had more awareness of their impact on their child. 75% of dads became more engaged in conversation with their children. I mean, they are amazing stats and percentages. So tell us a bit about the dads group, what it looks like, how they run, et cetera, et cetera.
Sure. Yeah. Well, it started off just dads getting together and then maybe, doing a hill tolly derby or a camp out with their kids or having fun with their kids.
Mm.
But then we began doing something that's turned out to be very powerful. We would provide them with a 15-minute video on some topic, like how do you help your dads with their education, or what do daughters need from their dads? Some of the things you just discussed with me, and we have experts talking about it and dads sharing in a 15-minute video. And then the dads walk out and say, gee, that was absolutely fantastic. I didn't know that. Now I know what to do. So that's the second advantage of having the dads groups. But the third advantage, which I admit, silly me, I did not predict. Now these dads, instead of dropping their kids at the school gate, they now know the other dads, and now they're starting to meet for coffee. So they start to meet for coffee, or they do a bike ride together, or one group I know, they go to the beach together and have a body surf and stuff and a coffee afterwards. So dads are getting connected. And one of the saddest things in Australia at the moment, I bet it's the same in other countries, is the loneliness of men. Lots of acquaintances, but very few close friends.
Yes.
And so this is a chance for dads to make friends and actually, as you say, talk about how the kids are going and what are you doing, or bringing the kids with them. And it's been a great spin-off having these dads groups. And I think we worked out there are about 9,400 schools in Australia, and we'd like to see dads groups in 9,400 schools.
Yeah.
But it's got to come from the dads, I think. They've got to go to the schools and say, we want what? They don't have to demand it. They can just do it. All the school's doing is emailing and letting the other dads know that it's happening. The teachers and principals don't have to do anything. They just have to form a dads group and then ask the Fathering Project if they could, access all their stuff.
Yeah.
So we have about 37 stations plus Vision Radio, and they would be linked to thousands probably of schools all around Australia. And so we would encourage any man who's listening to this, who's in a school where there's no fathers group, to do exactly what Bruce said. Get out there and start something.
That's right, Des. They could do it tomorrow. They could go to school, park their car, look at the other dads and say, hey, we're going to form a dads group. 2 people is a group.
Yeah, that's right.
2 people is a group. And then they're doing another 2 people. They got 4. Now they've got a dads group. And that is exactly what the Fathering Project helps with.
Yeah. Well, what we might do, Bruce, is get you back for a second show and we can expand on that a little bit. In the meantime, we haven't talked about your books, but you can check them out at thefatheringproject.org, that website, thefatheringproject.org, and sign yourself up for a men's group too if you're not already connected. Of course, you can reach out to us at momentumaustralia.org. Dr. Bruce Robinson has been our special guest this week on Momentum from the Fathering Project. Bruce, an absolute pleasure. I feel like we've just scratched the surface of all the knowledge that you've got. So I think we will get you back for a second show. But in the meantime, thanks for being with us this week, mate. Absolute pleasure.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks, Des. And I'll be very happy to come back anytime.
Well, that was an amazing show. We had Dr. Bruce Robinson talking about the Fathering Project. Absolutely amazing. And so can I encourage all of us, including me, to have a re-listen to that program. It's just amazing. So many tips. And also all our other shows are on our website. And the website is momentumaustralia.org. That's momentumaustralia, all one word, .org.
Yeah, fair call, Des. There was a lot in that show for sure. And you know what? At our website too, much as the Fathering Project has lots of resources, we have lots of resources for you too at momentumaustralia.org. Things about all different facets of life just to help you on your journey. And you know, one of our core messages here at Momentum is don't do life in isolation or alone. You need to have a conversation, but perhaps you've got people around you you're not really sure you want to talk to about whatever it might be that you're going through. You feel like you need an outside party and it's a confidential conversation. Remember, we've got the Momentum Care Line, 1-800-000-636. That's 1-800-000-636.
And so that's it for this show this week. Thanks for joining us. And we look forward to talking to you next week.
Right here on Momentum. Until next week, take care. God bless.
You've been listening to Momentum, a show that helps men succeed in life. For more information or to hear this week's show again, go to momentumaustralia.org. You can also access a whole range of resources to help you on your journey and to get in touch with the team at momentumaustralia.org.